Ja, hallo und herzlich willkommen. Einen wunderschönen guten Abend. An einem Freitagabend, an dem wir wieder zu Hause sitzen müssen und uns leider nicht persönlich treffen können, das ist sehr schade, aber wir bleiben optimistisch und hoffen, dass wir uns bald endlich einmal an einem Ort treffen bzw. wieder treffen können. Herzlich willkommen zum zweiten Webinar der Initiative Menschenrechtsstadt Köln. Welcome, everybody. A very good evening and fantastic to see you back here in our second webinar of our recently founded Initiative Menschenrechtsstadt Köln, the Cologne Human Rights Initiative. We are very delighted that you are all attending this very special event as a new opener, a new opening door to new doors of responsibility of human rights in our city, Cologne. My name is Homara Mansouri, and I will be hosting you as a part of the board of the Initiative Menschenrechtsstadt Köln, and I'm very happy to join you here tonight. Well, many of you have already been to our first webinar last week when we talked about the global perspective on local human rights responsibility. And welcome back to you all. Very happy to see you again, even though I can't see you. We hope to join you and to see you the next times in vivo, and so that we can really speak and talk face to face. Well, and hello also to everybody who has now arrived and joined us to our second webinar. We are very, very pleased to have you here as well. And just to let you know, we published a recording of the first webinar on our website, which we will show you later. So if you'd like to have a look at the first webinar, you are perfectly invited to do so. And we will record this session as well. But your names and faces will not be shown or published, so please do not worry about your hairstyle. Everything's going to be fine. But I would like to tell you also a bit about our initiative. Now you are attending the second webinar that we have of a complete series of webinars that we will be doing in the course of the next months. You can attend these webinars for free, and we are happy when you continue to join us, of course. Our aim, the aim of the initiative, is to promote the idea of Cologne as a human rights city and to push forward the public discourse in how far Cologne can implement a structured human rights-based approach. But we also want to share the experience and the practice of other cities to create a room for exchange and networking between different cities in order to get new ideas for our work. And so we are very happy that you are here, and please talk to us, please discuss your topics with us, and of course, please spread the word. So now you see we have different faces here, and I'm very happy to welcome you all. Tonight we will discuss the rise of human rights cities in the European Union, and we are very happy to be accompanied by two fantastic experts, which are Geraldine Gier and Hans Sackers. Welcome to you both. We are very, very delighted to listen to your keynotes tonight and then, of course, to discuss your inputs. Last but not least, I should mention that we would really like to know what you think as our guests of this webinar. Please ask your questions and then let us take part in your ideas and share them with us in the Q&A field that you find at the bottom of your screen. You might find it as Q&A for questions and answers, or you might find it as F&A, Fragen and Antworten. So please, if you have something that you would like to comment on, or if you would like to share your ideas or just ask questions to Hans and Geraldine, this is the place to do so. And then, of course, we will read out your questions and pass them on to our experts. But now, please welcome our Deputy Mayor of the City of Cologne. We are very happy that he's joining us again, that he has found the time also to share his perspective with us. Welcome, Mr. Andreas Wolter. We're very happy to have you here. Please let me introduce you with a couple of sentences, and then we are very happy to listen to your greetings from the city of Cologne. Mr. Wolter, you are a member of the Cologne City Council and you are deputy mayor of our city of Cologne. Mr. Wolter has been directly elected to the City Council 4 times. And the City Council elected him deputy mayor with a large majority in both 2014 and 2020. He is also a board member of the German-French Committee of the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, and chairman of the Climate Alliance, an association of 1,700 member municipalities in 26 European countries. And he is also someone who is burning for the idea of human rights cities, and that's why we're very happy to listen to your words. Welcome, Andreas.
Thank you, Homara, for your introduction, and thank you for being here. And I would like to send also a warm welcome from our Lord Mayor Henriette Reker, and also from the City Council of Cologne to this important webinar. So on October 24, I report a little bit about our activities with our sister cities and what we are doing in our city. Today, I would like to talk about our networking in human rights issues in our international networks. I think Cologne is a has a human rights friendly political culture, and we have a strong civic engagement and a wide range of civil society initiatives. So there is a participation in international and national initiatives, and also from the City Council in many resolution concept and action plans. And if we talk about international networks, it's very important that we are engaged in the CMR. So that is a European network of cities and regions. And by example, with the CMR, I was able to travel to Turkey as a trial observer for the arrested mayor of Diyarbakir, Mrs. Gültan Kishanak. That was one of the results of working together with public resolution, and we showed together our solidarity, not only in our sister cities. It's also important to show our solidarity with to the mayors or the politicians who are under pressure in their countries, like it's actually in Turkey. So we made in this European networks a lot of different statements. For example, the CMR Secretary General asked for clarification to arrested Turkish mayors for the LGBTI-free zones in 2020. Also, Turkey again in April this year, European leaders condemned Turkish withdrawals from the Istanbul Convention. So for us, it's important in our politics, in our foreign politics. I think local authorities are closer to the citizens than national governments. And so that means that although we have direct influence of the quality of life of citizens, and the Cologne City Council is in the process of setting a human rights office. So we adopted it in our budget a few weeks ago, and I hope we can start at the beginning with the next year. And for us, it's also very, very important. But we are now, and that's the reason why this webinar is so important, we are developing a framework for fundamental rights. And it would be a great support for the city of Cologne. So I welcome very much this event. We are a member of the ECHR network. So we have an office for prevention and against intolerance, discrimination, and exclusion. And in this network against intolerance and discrimination, I think we have quite a good of assets. So we have an office for the representative of a disabled person. We have also the LGBTIQ office. We have the Council of Religions, and we are active in different action plans. So by example, a diversity concept, an action plan for disabled persons, a plan for empowerment for an integrative city society, the gender equality plan, and actually also the action plan against homo and transphobia. For us, it's very important, Cologne, an LGBTIQ friendly city, that we are a member of the Rainbow City Network. It was founded by Amsterdam, Barcelona, Turin, and Cologne in 2011. So from these 4 cities, 3 are sister cities. And Actually, we have got 39 members, also with our sister cities Rotterdam, Cork, and Esch in Luxembourg. And why is it so important? The Rainbow Cities Network work to guarantee persons' sexual rights with the help of innovative public policies so that LGBTIQ people can enjoy their sexual identity and orientation. And the mission is to connect officials from the administration, policymakers, and experts for the exchange of best practices. And the third point I would like to mention is our engagement in Climate Alliance. So Climate Alliance is one of the networks who works against the climate change. And there's a strong statement of Climate Alliance is climate justice. So we are fighting for indigenous people rights and for people with a small greenhouse gas emissions footprint. So they save the rainforest, but they are infected hardly by climate change and also by the way of our economic behavior. So we entered in a climate partnership with the Amazon community close to Yarinacocha, that's in the Peru Amazon. And in the Yarinacocha, we supported the indigenous communities in the fight against deforestation of rainforest and thus advocate for the protection of their territories. And Cologne, in turn, has committed itself with the framework of these climate partnerships above all to reducing CO2 emissions and raising public awareness of this issue. And together we, with the entire city society, with business, industry, chambers, associations, clubs, other institutions, as well as committed private individuals, we want to advance Cologne's development into an innovative and climate protecting city. But why climate partnership with the Amazon region? Climate partnership between an indigenous community and the city of Cologne strengthens the indigenous partners in their struggle of recognition against discrimination and land theft and deforestation. In this way, we bring the local problems to an international level and show the connection with climate change and climate action on the ground. And this is done in cooperation with Climate Alliance, in which Cologne is one, yes, is member for many, many years. And also we work together with our NGOs like INFOE, the Institute for Ecology and Action Ethnology. And the climate partnership Cologne-Yarinacocha includes concrete projects, education, information, sensitize citizens to the global importance of rainforest. Also for human rights issues. And so we are working together on different ways of support, of technical support, like sewage treatment, electric mobility, photovoltaic systems, but also exchanges from students from Germany to Peru, to exchange of volunteers from Cologne to Yarinacocha. And and the most important thing of this is illegal felled palm oil plantations for so-called biofuels. And we are able to support these communities with concrete projects in their permaculture, educational projects, protection of their territories, and through our communal solidarity. And these indigenous rights are and existence are massively threatened. And on the hand, because the shifting cultivation, which is necessary on the sensitive soil, is no longer possible. Fishing is made much more difficult due to blocked access to the soils and the water. The water is contaminated by pesticides. These communities have to retreat and move into the slums of Lima. The forest will be cut down, and even more, the culture of indigenous people will be destroyed. So let me finish with what the indigenous people rightly claim we are part of the solution in fight against climate change, and no rainforest will be destroyed where we live, and sustainable use, we have a sustainable use of the resources. And that makes also an alliance on human rights issues between European cities and indigenous peoples so interesting. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Andreas Wolter, our Deputy Mayor of the City of Cologne, for your input. We will listen to your words and your perspective also a couple of moments later after the inputs of Geraldine Guy and of Hans Sackers that we are looking forward to. And after that, you will also see our chairman of the initiative of the Initiative Menschenrechtsstadt Köln, which is Sebastian Bartsch. So he will also say hello to you and will tell you how he will combine the essence of the inputs with the targets, the aims that we have as an initiative. But now, please welcome Geraldine Guy. We are very happy that you are with us, Geraldine. That's fantastic that you could made it. Maybe I could say a few lines about you and your work, if you allow me to do so. Geraldine Guy is working in the Technical Assistance and Capacity Building Unit of the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, the so-called FRA. And her focus is on engagement with local and regional authorities in the EU, including partners such as the European Committee of the Regions, the Council of Europe's Congress of Local and Regional Authorities, and cities networks. She engages and closely cooperates with a broad range of FRA stakeholders at international, European, EU, national, and local levels. And Ms. Guy has been working in the areas of online communication, cooperation, and networking since 2006. And we are very interested to hear what you have to tell us about the human rights city concept, the rise of human rights cities in the EU, and the recently adopted framework for human rights cities. Geraldine, thank you very much for joining us. We are very keen on listening to your keywords.
Thank you very much, Omera. It's really a pleasure to be part of that webinar. I'm extremely pleased to be able to indeed present this framework, but most of all to talk about human rights at the local level. That's the strong focus of our discussion. Indeed, I'm working at the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, an EU agency with the Center of Expertise for the European Union on fundamental rights issue. I will share my presentation. I hope you can all see it. So our work is to support the EU institution and the member states in various areas of fundamental rights. So our work covers quite a lot of different topics. We are addressing issue on child rights, on equality, on discrimination, on data protection, on asylum and migration, on hate crime. So we have a wide range of topics that we cover. In that regard, we work in partnership with a lot of different actors. We, of course, have strong cooperation with international organizations, the EU institution, national governments, all different national actors, whether it's the national human rights institutions, civil society, academia. But of course, as soon as you look at human rights, you very quickly arrive to local level. And for many years, we have developed strong cooperation with local level actors. Of course, with the European Committee of the Region, the Council of Europe, City Network, but also with certain cities specifically. And that in particular, we had several projects on human rights at the local level. A first project in 2008-9 on the local communities, and in particular one big project in 2011 to 2014 on multi-level governance that address different level of governance to see how they were cooperating. And in that kind of context, we had a lot of findings about how human rights was addressed in the local context. And we had the possibility to really understand it by having really direct contact with different cities and learn from them on how they were implementing human rights at the local level.
Dear Geraldine, I'm just telling you that we can't see your presentation, so please try to share it again.
Sorry.
It's nice listening to you, but
yes,
you prepared it so well.
Thanks a lot for mentioning. Is it better?
Yes. Now
yes,
we can
sorry.
see.
You didn't miss so much, don't worry. So regarding, let's start first with the human right at the local level. It's, sorry, yes. I mean, basically, human right is definitely an obligation. So when we talk about human rights principle, human rights, they apply to all levels of governments. And that means that whether we are in an urban or rural areas, whether it's a big or small city, a province or region, there is an obligation to implement, protect, and promote fundamental rights. So that is an element that is extremely important. At the same time, beyond this obligation, much of the work at the local level is connected to human rights. Many of the services that are provided to people are linked to human rights: access to education, access to healthcare, social services, even in access to water and sanitation, management of public space, the participation in public debate. Well, the city is an employer, environmental protection, as it was mentioned by Mr. Volter. All of these are really strongly connected to human rights. But yet, at the local level, there are also quite a lot of challenges that needs to be considered. First, the difficulty sometimes to coordinate well between all levels of government in the area of fundamental rights. The difficulty for certain cities to connect to human rights. It's not an obvious link at local level to consider that what the city is doing is actually linked to human rights and human rights principle. The human rights language also appear very often very theoretical and not necessarily applicable to a local context. At the same time, there is a lot of activities and a lot of engagement. And what was demonstrated by Mr. Volter is that there are so many cities who are already doing a lot. But this work is mostly focusing on the thematic aspect. So, and that's extremely important because that allows to address very concrete issue. But it means that there is often a work that is in silo, not necessarily sufficiently connected or not necessarily touching everybody in our communities. Within that, in consideration, those particular challenges, this initiative of Human Rights City that started in 1997 was particularly interesting. Because it was really a community who really started this idea of Human Rights City. They claim they used the human rights terms, they link directly to international norm and standard. The focus was really on participation and people's empowerment. But it was not only that there was a formal declaration to commit to human rights, but it was also linked to very a strategic planning with the objective and very concrete action and monitoring of this work. The work also was built on cooperation and partnership. So at the time it was with people movements, which is a human rights education that created an environment that supported that process. This movement has expanded internationally. There has been a Human Rights City that have started in Europe as well. Graz became the first Human Rights City in 2001. expanded to other cities like Barcelona, Vienna, Utrecht, of course, that we'll speak today. We have also cities in the US, of course, in South America that has developed, in Africa, in Asia. So that movement has developed, and it has developed, of course, building with some of the principle of the Rosario approach, but at the same time also adapting to the local context. And that is also an interesting way. But that movement of human rights city has not developed in silo. It was also in parallel with the movement of the right to the city, which really addressed the localization of human rights. So how the human right principle can be implemented in a local context, but also with a lot of work in the international settings about contributing, for city contributed to the human rights agenda. And of course, I will mention, for instance, the development of the European Charter for the safeguarding of human rights in the city. But there are, of course, many other initiatives that have developed so in that context as well. Regarding the EU, what is of course, the involvement of the local and regional level is particularly important. The EU has been built, of course, on the principle of democracy, rule of law, the respect for human rights. And at the heart of it, there is the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, which is basically our EU Bill of Rights. The local and the regional authorities are very much part of the EU governance. I will not, of course, develop too much that part. There is really a lot of initiative and activity, urban agenda partnership. And what we can see in the 2 or 3 last years, there has been really a stronger role to the cities and region in many of the new strategy put in place. I'm listing a few of them related to equality, LGBTIQ strategy, the Roma strategy, of course. But I would say it's particularly true in the EU Charter, the new EU Charter strategy, that where the local and regional is particularly developed. I think it's mentioned around 17 times in a particular strategy, not only in the context of the application of the EU Charter also at local and regional level, but also the importance of raising awareness on fundamental rights and the role of city and region can play to raise awareness of people's rights in the EU. So, and it's in that kind of context that we've started working with the few cities. I'm not able to move. Yes, that's in that context that this framework for human rights city is being developed with this, let's say, contribute to this renewed agenda to work with city. So why a framework for human rights city in the EU? First, as a step to recognize that so many cities and regions within the EU in these past years have done so much for the protection of human rights. So for us, it was really important to recognize well this tremendous contribution. Also to provide guidance on how city can continue to deepen their initiative in human rights. It's also aimed to encourage higher standards, facilitate the exchange of practices, and contribute to mutual learning between cities. And as I mentioned, the Human Rights City is, of course, an international initiative, but not enough links with the EU and EU instruments. So we thought it was really important to develop further in that area. That framework is not really a top-down from FRA. It has been really developed with city, with region, and with the practitioner of Human Rights City. So that framework, it's based on 3 strands: foundation, foundation, structure, and tools. Those 3 strands are very closely connected. So what is really important that is also these 3 strands are also inspired by the international norm. So that's again not something that necessarily is totally new in the human rights field, but it's really implemented in the localized basically, to apply to a local perspective. So we have a foundation which is on the on the bottom, as you see, which are the commitment to the right and the principle. Then we have structures, and the structures are covering a series of mechanisms that allow to integrate human rights into the daily practice of a city. And finally, the tools, which actually supports the structure and helps to make actually those commitments a reality. So going through a bit more in detail of those instruments. In terms of foundation, we have 4 elements on the foundation, which aims at having a broader integration of human rights in the city work. So the Human Rights City Initiative builds very much on international instruments. So that's one of the commitments to commit to these international instruments, but to all of them. It's not about picking up what we want, pick and choose. No, it's really about all of them. There is also a commitment to focus also on EU instruments. And of course, the EU Charter, as I mentioned, is an important element. The commitment also to integrate sustainable development goals and the work around the Agenda 2030. SDGs have been really quite effective to support cities in narrative about human rights, in using indicators. So there's a lot of cities who have used SDG as to support the human rights work. And finally, in that area, the possibility for city also to contribute to human rights mechanism. And that in particular in the international context, UPR or other human rights mechanism that exist, even if city do not have a direct role, there is really possibility for city to provide an input and submit a report that indicate what they are doing and what are the good practices or what they would suggest to improve. In terms of structure, what is really important that I will highlight, it's having a formal declaration. The commitment is really important, but it needs to be really integrated in the city work, and the formal declaration by the city council or a similar body is extremely important for that. Being able to coordinate is also very helpful. Very often there is a city councillor who is in charge with human rights within this remit. That helps to keep an overview, that helps to ensure that the city council is regularly informed of what's happening. And that creates a form of coordination between all the human rights related activities in the city. A human rights office or human rights department is also extremely important to facilitate the exchange, to create an engagement with stakeholders, to provide awareness raising or create human rights education. So there is a lot of possibilities through the human rights office to support this human rights culture throughout the municipality, but also beyond. Finally, certain tools such as advisory participatory council are important to have a standard and regular place for channeling an engagement with the population. Of course, there can be different forms of engagement with the population to discuss on human rights issue. But it's really important that there is some stable mechanism in place where there can be a possibility for discussion. Those participatory council can be on human rights, but they can be also thematic for youth, for Roma, for migrants. There could be different variety of model in that regard. As it was mentioned also previously, the role of justice into that, and it's very important that in human rights that people who are facing discrimination have the possibility to have some form of access to remedies. So having in place an anti-discrimination office, a local ombudsman, victim support services are extremely important in the implementation and protection of human rights at the local level. Annual reporting contribute to make human rights part of the discussion in the city council regularly, and that is part, along with certain tools, to actually have a regular look at the situation of human rights and not being just a topic from once in a while. Finally, under the structure, I would highlight the partnership with national bodies in particular. They could be really interesting initiative. For instance, in Sweden, we had an agreement between Raoul Wallenberg Institute and the Swedish Association of Municipalities for working on human rights at the local level. There are some national human rights institutions who develop some project at the local level. So there can be quite a lot of partnership, and also at international and EU level that can create opportunity for further implementation of human rights. And finally, in the area of tools, I would say, of course, mainstreaming human rights is having a cross-cutting approach to human rights is fundamental, along with the human rights-based approach. Having this way of approaching human rights through this approach of human rights-based approach is one of the key components. Human rights budgeting was mentioned also by Mr. Wolter. It's really important that human rights budgeting is not necessarily that creating a new model of budgeting, but really to make sure that we identify within the budget what are the elements that are allocated to human rights activity, because that allows to make sure that the city priorities correspond to the budget also that are implemented. Procurement activities, there's also very much an area for development in human rights. That is very important that all the services that are delivered through external contractor, these also respond to human rights principle. Finally, as part of the programming and action plan, having a monitoring and evaluation process are also extremely important. Communicating rights, it's really important not to forget that aspect and use really values, the rights and those principles as part of the regular communication. The human rights city are not necessarily stating all the time that they are human rights city, but they communicate really constantly on human rights, and they raise awareness to people's rights. They are developing human rights education activities, so that the communicating rights is really particularly important. Finally, and not the least, the exchange between city. That's an important element. All human rights city, when they are starting reflecting about developing themselves, they always exchange among each other. So this exchange and the mutual learning is very much part of the human rights city approach, and it was really important that it's part also of the framework. So that framework is not considered as a charter where people city have to sign. It's not by that, but it's really to look at those elements, and city can actually see what is the most relevant for them, and develop their own strategy to make use of that. But we still really recommend that the three elements are considered. It's extremely important to have all of that. So a framework, but what's next? Having difficulty to move. I can't manage to get to my next slide. So what is the next step? How can this framework can be used? There can be different ways. Of course, it can be a guide for city who wants to develop their work in human rights. That's the most obvious layer. It can be also very much used for city to assess their state of development of human rights work and be inspired on things that are more that they can do. It can be also an impetus, and in that regard, there could be different level. At city level, for more city to join this movement, and I'm referring in particular to a new campaign that will be launched very soon. I think it's on the 10th of December, for more city around the globe to actually join this initiative. So we hope that that would create an incentive, but also for national activities. And we hope that there could be a discussion in many member states on ways that city can be further engaged with national level actors, building on the framework. And finally, at EU level, there are more policies that are being developed, and it will be interesting that a human right-based approach and human rights is actually really part of those elements. In particular, climate change, urban development, there are social rights, of course, there are so many elements. And finally, as a space for cooperation among the human rights city, but also all those like-minded cities who are quite active in human rights, there is really an opportunity for continuing developing initiative, continuing finding a better way to address human rights and possibility even to discuss the development of a human rights city level. Some cities are interested eventually through an accreditation. So this framework can create this platform of cooperation without becoming a network, because that's not the intention, but created this space for further exchange and development between cities themselves. Voila. So generally, I would say this framework is aiming at opening a new areas for discussion between cities and the EU, and we hope that the framework is not considered as a fixed model. We are considering as a living document. So of course the feedback and the practice on using this framework will be very important. We are going to make it a bit more accessible by preparing a booklet, a shorter version that will be available in different languages as well. That will facilitate the use by different cities. And we continue to reach out and discuss and see how this can further support the city. Thank you very much.
Dear Geraldine, thank you very much for telling us more about the Human Rights Cities concept, and also telling us more about the new framework. We are very much looking forward to the booklet, and we are very much looking forward to discussing actually how we can cope with a very complex thing like Human Rights City, and tell the people who are interested actually that it has very good specialties that each city can profit from in order to promote human rights. So thank you very much for your input. And I'm just looking at the Q&As, and so far I haven't seen any questions. So you seem to be keeping your questions for the Q&A session that we will have after Sebastian's input. So dear Geraldine, thank you very much for your input. And we are very interested to know how Hans Sackers sees everything when he puts everything on a concrete local basis. Welcome also to you, dear Hans. Thank you very much for joining us. Hans Sackers works in the city administration of Utrecht, in the Netherlands, of course. For almost 20 years, Hans was head of Department of European and International Affairs, and his current position is strategic advisor for localizing human rights and SDGs. Beyond his local focus, Hans is very much involved in international networks for the promotion of human rights cities. And we are very pleased that you will be explaining to us now, dear Hans, why becoming a human rights city matters, and you will present key elements of Utrecht's practice as a human rights city. So thank you for giving us a closer look into your municipality, and we are very interested to know what you have to tell about it. Thank you very much, and enjoy.
Yes, well, thank you very much for this kind introduction. I start sharing. This is the second. You see a blue screen now?
Yes.
Okay, but then
Making the rights real.
the first slide we missed, and I cannot go forward. So it's. Can you see what is wrong, or I try again? Hello.
Yes, go back to the first slide and then start sharing again.
All right, start sharing. That's somewhere blocked. Ah, there it is. Start. Screen share. Well, it should work now. Yes. Yeah, what I will try to do is give you a short impression what we try to work on in Utrecht on when we talk about human rights city. And well, what you see here is a little bit illustration for my story, where it's in the what is important part of our human rights city project, and that is that we also try to tell the story about human rights in the public space and to try to develop a kind of human rights culture locally. And this started for us actually 11 years ago, because we, of course, like all cities, we do a lot on all kind of sectoral policies that are very much related to human rights. But until 2010, we never used the word human rights policies explicitly. Sometimes in refugee policies we did, but not in an overarching way. And we got a phone call in 2010 from someone from the FRA and asked, well, do you like to join a project? And well, we didn't know what it was about, but we said yes, and we had a very enthusiastic mayor on that moment, and one of the deputy mayors studied human rights. So on the political level, there was a lot of enthusiasm. And so we became part, together with the Ministry of Interior in the Netherlands and Amnesty International, part of a European project. And that was very inspiring for us. And one of the things we did was for the first time an assessment of our local policies. So this just by joining this project, we start to look through another lens to our local reality. And this is a report that we sent to the city council during this FRA project. And what you see is here that we choose 10 policy areas and programs, and we try to make an analysis through the lens of human rights and evaluate, is this good enough? And well, that was a huge exercise for us, because we had to describe our policies very short. Then we had to find somewhere in all these human rights treaties the right articles, and to create a kind of lens to evaluate this local policy, but this is not existing. So you have to do it, at least at that time, we had to do it our own, and then to do an evaluation. And of course, there is in the new framework very interesting options to do it by expert, to do it peer-to-peer, to do it by city committees, but that also are more advanced ways of. We did it ourselves. We hired a human rights expert and asked that person, well, can you help us by evaluating this? But it's a very the most easiest way of doing this. And then we, during this this early years, we also had the special event of opening the National Institute for Human Rights in Utrecht. Is based in Utrecht, and it was a very interesting and an important moment for our project, because it was in a huge theater, 1,000 people. The Queen was there, and what you see in the picture is the first college of all the board members of the National Institute, and also the Mrs. Pillay, the former High Commissioner of Human Rights, was there, and she opened a little bit, making a joke from, well, it's very nice to be here in the first human rights city of the Netherlands. And until then, we didn't did any marketing or communication on that we wanted to be or to be seen as a human rights city. And of course, it was not a formal title, but by framing it like that, it starts to become a much more process in our city that started to, that we had to find out how to do this. And one of the most important things we did, of course, in the early years, we did some internal training in the municipality with Amnesty International together. We did awareness raising in the municipality, but finally this was in civic society with all these active members of all kind of NGOs and civic groups and activist groups, bringing them together, from poverty movement to the refugee movement and disabled people, very broad, bringing them together, let them talk together about things they have in common and how human rights could be a way of inspiring each other. We offered all these activities in a digital platform, an agenda, and blog, and so on. Organizations can present themselves and so on. And I will show you a few impressions that there was also what kind of things that were carrying this movement in Utrecht, and that's this is one of them. There's a foundation that is around St. Martin's, and they are very active not only in November with this tour with a lot of children through the city, and but it's very much about solidarity all over the year. And another example of the LGBTI community is very much active in this coalition. You see here, well, all the steps that were made the last decade, and this is the last very funny and the longest bicycle road, I believe, in the Netherlands, with in the colors of the rainbow. So we have a kind of Utrecht approach that is certainly not very in line with until now with the FRA framework. So we are really not a very perfect example of applying this framework. But what we try to do is to focus on, in these early years, on a coalition of stakeholders in society, that to see it as a cultural process and not too much as a legal process. We went 2 times to court based on human rights in 2 court cases. We went to Strasbourg as a city, also together with NGOs, against the Dutch state, and especially about undocumented children and documented people, homeless people living on the street, and we were forbidden to take care about them. And as we say, and as a city, we said, well, this is not how it should be. We have to take responsibility based on human rights for these groups. And 2 times we won this case against the Dutch government. So it's a model that is also looking for human rights as an inspiration, and not that much to be too normative about what everything that is wrong and not good enough. Trying to use it as also a design principle for future policies. We had a kind of strategy to put it on the political agenda without too much politicizing, not to make it a leftish hobby, and also to find examples that were interesting for right-wing parties. And we said, well, we have to work together on Europe and international level. What I said, refugees are a permanent topic in driving this movement. And you see that here from a few weeks ago, after the Belarus crisis, this was, you see, well, this is in Dutch, but what you could read here is that the mayor explains that we want to have more refugees, that will organize the welcoming of them, because we are a human rights city. So in the argumentation, this is so formulated that it's a very natural step of this is another natural step that the city council said, well, we want to become a children's rights city because we are a human rights city. And the same, we want to be a shelter city, so we having 4 times a year an international human rights activists and giving them some period of rest by the Shelter City program. In the Netherlands, it feels still after 10 years quite lonely. It's difficult to have a sparring partner. The mayor of Middelburg, of course, and the city of Middelburg is very active. The city of Amsterdam in some periods are active, but then we have 400 other municipalities, and actually there is no other municipality that is using the terminology of human rights city in an explicit way. So it's we decided that what we started together with the network of cities working together in the FRA project, they went on working together, meeting each other. And this is a very special moment that in the middle you see Linda Voortmans. She is the responsible deputy mayor for human rights. We were invited to come to Geneva to speak with Kate Gilmore, the former deputy high commissioner, and here we had for the first time that we became aware that we need 2 things as international community, and one is we need numbers, bigger numbers of cities that are joining this movement to have a better voice on telling this story. And we promoted the idea, can we come in 10 years time from 100 to 1,000 human rights cities as our contribution to the 2030 agenda. And we need a label, we need a professional, much more standard about how to become a human rights city. And well, that was 2 years ago. And the good news is that we have now, since 2 weeks, the presidency of the UCLG took over this campaign. So it's now part of the worldwide organization of local regional communities. And that will mean that the ambition is to have every year 100 cities, new cities, trying to become a human rights city. We'll have a learning platform, and the charter agenda that was adopted in 2011 in Florence, it will be renewed, and everyone can give input in the new version that will be at the table on the big 3-year summit of the UCLG in 2022 in South Korea. And this is important place for this community, for our movement. Is the city of Gwangju organized every year a huge conference. It's very interesting to have a look on all their documents, and it's very rich archive also. And the label, that was of course the story of Geraldine told. In Europe, we were so lucky to have the FRA picking up this aspiration, and work with some cities and a lot of experts and institutions together to formulate and to design this framework. So it's really great work, great help for us also, because when you look through the lens of this framework, you see directly what you're missing, and we are missing almost all elements of the framework. So that I think, and perhaps to end my story, that you now already see we have elections in the Netherlands in March next year, that members of the city council start to know about this framework, look to our own city. And now we had already questions in the city council. What are we doing in the next phase with this framework? Can we put it on the table of the negotiations of the parties making the majority in the city council in spring next year? So this will be of great help. In our city, it will really be the guide, the next step. And so I'm also very happy that we now in Cologne, that we having you also on board in the cooperation, supporting each other and finding our way in well, to make a strong network in Europe. So thank you very much.
Hans Akkers, thank you very much for your input and also for your encouraging words when it comes to what we're trying to promote in Cologne. And it's very inspiring also to hear just a part of all the things that you do in Utrecht to give us inspiration and also to give strength to other cities who aspire to be human rights cities. We have questions already in the Q&A, and I would like to ask you and also Geraldine a question after Sebastian's input. Sebastian is our chairman of the Human Rights Initiative in Cologne, and I'm very grateful if you could please say a few words about our initiative and our aims, and also how you can use the inputs that we got from Geraldine and Hans for the work of the initiative. Sebastian, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Geraldine. I think I shared my screen. It's visible, I hope, for everyone. Yes, I would like to introduce briefly our Cologne Human Rights City initiative, mainly by talking about our objectives and about how we intend to realize these objectives in the coming months and years. But before that, very briefly, just to clarify, we are a civil society initiative. We are a registered association, which is an eingetragener Verein in Germany. We are independent of political parties, and we founded this initiative in late summer of 2020. But let me talk about the objectives that we have, and our main objective is that we want Cologne to become a human rights city. And this is not because of the label, but because of the effects that this is likely to have. This sounds perhaps trivial, but this distinction between label and the effects that might go with it is very important to us. So that we are not misunderstood by some who might think, why another label? Cologne already has so many. In fact, Cologne already has a number of labels that are human rights relevant, but the important thing is that each of them is an expression of serious ambition and also of practical efforts. So Cologne is a child-friendly city. Andreas Wolter mentioned, among other things, that Cologne is Rainbow City, Cologne is a safe harbor, Cologne is fair trade town, and there are other labels that the city has received that are human rights relevant. And the same would, of course, also apply to the human rights city label. So declaring itself a human rights city would, in our view, signal clearly an even greater ambition in promoting and protecting human rights locally. It would create a kind of umbrella for the many important but sometimes fragmented human rights efforts in our city. It would definitely add value to the already existing measures and efforts, which we think is very important, and it would place them in a larger context along with new activities to be undertaken. The question of why we focus on human rights in cities and on the human rights city concept, I think, has basically already been answered in the previous inputs. So there is not that much to add on that now, I think. Very basically, cities have human rights responsibilities. There's a global trend to make better use of cities' human rights potential. This was, I think, very clear from what Geraldine presented, and also from what we heard in the first webinar last week from Bahram Ghazi from the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. What is also clear is that to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights, targeted approaches are needed, and this means going beyond some sort of human rights friendly practices that are not really undertaken with a clear human rights perspective and rights-based. And finally, there are strengths and merits of the human rights city concept, and we heard also about that in the previous presentations. And one is, of course, that the human rights city concept is a kind of holistic concept that allows to focus large parts of cities' political, social, cultural, and other agendas on the human rights framework. In Cologne, many things are already being done to promote and protect human rights, and Andreas Volta mentioned several examples. And yet there is a need, and there is also scope in many fields in Cologne to make more systematic use of local human rights opportunities. As Cologne Human Rights City Initiative, we are convinced that declaring Cologne a human rights city would be an effective lever for this, but it is of course not enough that only we are convinced. We will need to be able to convince others as well, and to do this, we see a number of things as essential. To make the goal of making Cologne a human rights city the subject of a lively discussion in the city is one of the most basic things that need to be accomplished. To pursue that goal in cooperation with as many others as possible. To explain and disseminate the human rights city concept as we start doing tonight and will continue doing over the coming months and years. To mobilize many to help develop and implement a broad-based vision of Cologne as a human rights city. And for this, it is extremely important to show practicable ways to become a human rights city, and to initiate and implement activities that move Cologne. And this means the city council, the city administration, social, cultural, and other local institutions, as well as the city society at large, forward on this path. The word cloud that you see on this slide shows an incomplete, but I think nevertheless useful collection of topics, institutions, and processes that are relevant in the local promotion and protection of human rights. But not only that, it shows also, I think, where activities that move Cologne forward on the path to becoming a human rights city could be targeted. So any keyword that in this list would be suitable for a closer look from a human rights perspective and for the development of building blocks for a vision of Cologne as a human rights city that is inspiring, but also realistic. So questions one could ask in this connection, for example, are what is a specific local human rights responsibility in a given topic area that we see here in this word cloud? Which international and national human rights documents set the foundations, to use the term used in the FRA's framework? What is interesting and inspiring in other cities? Where does Cologne stand? What is being discussed? What is currently happening? And what is planned in our city? How are human rights cities, for example, institutionally anchored in the administration, in the city administration? And are there offices with cross-sectional responsibility? What meaningful data and reports exist on the realization of human rights in our city, and what gaps in knowledge are there? Which resolutions, concepts, action plans, projects, and measures are relevant? What are the needs for change? And finally, what, on the basis of all that, would be suitable voluntary commitments for Cologne as a human rights city in these areas? I'm extremely grateful that Geraldine and Hans provided so many practical ideas and also so much guidance on how a plan of making a city a human rights city can be taken forward. And as Cologne Human Rights City Initiative, we will definitely use the framework that Geraldine presented So one important, or perhaps the most important use case that we see for the foreseeable future here is in Cologne, is that we will try to pave the way for a coalition of local actors to carry out an analysis of existing and missing structures and tools to use once again the terms from the framework. This would, of course, have to be done in a participatory and inclusive process that should lead to a better understanding of the local situation and needs for change, of course, from a human rights point of view, appropriate city commitments, and also an agreement about ways of implementation, for example, local human rights action plans, and monitoring, for example, the use of local human rights indicators, annual local human rights reports, and so on and so forth. So this is an ambitious agenda, and we know, of course, that nothing of this will have a chance to be accomplished without having many joining in the coming weeks and months. So we invite everyone to join in this effort of making Cologne a human rights city in the coming years. I would like to close my little presentation with emphasizing that more information on the Cologne Human Rights Initiative is available, of course, on the web, on our website, in a booklet that we have published. We are also on Twitter. We continue also this webinar series early next year, and so there will be ample opportunities to not just follow what we are doing, but also to get in touch with us and see how we can work together to move this ambitious plan forward. We will put the links in the chat so that everyone can be connected with us easily. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for presenting the initiative and its aims, but also for sharing your ideas on Geraldine's and Hans's input. And we are now very interesting to look at the Q&A, at the question and answer section, because some of you have already asked questions, and these questions go to Geraldine and Hans. So now it's audience participation time, and I would like to pick the first question that has already been answered in the chat by Hans, but it is linked to a question that I had for Geraldine, so I will try to combine these both, if you don't mind. Dear Hans, someone asked you, which resources, headcount and budget do you have on a local level to work on the human rights issue? And let me now read out the answer that Hans gave to the participant. Not a lot. Okay, let's try to paraphrase this. Not a lot. It's just one colleague for 8 hours per week, 40,000 euros as a budget. I work half-time, also Hans works part-time for the whole international dimension, and you are about to do a claim for more budget after the elections that you mentioned, Hans. That's very interesting actually to see what reality is like on a local basis in a municipality and how you can put things into practice with a budget that is not very high. And I would like to link this question that you already answered from your perspective, dear Hans, with the question that I had for Geraldine, because you talked in your framework, you talked about human rights budgeting. That's a very important point actually, also for cities who would like to become human rights cities, and they might not have the budget, or they might have concerns, or they might even be in debt. So my question to you is, does the framework that you just presented offer any recommendations for the acquisition of financial resources for human rights-based activities, dear Geraldine?
Yes, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I have several elements to bring in. The framework does not provide detail in that regard. We mentioned some suggestion in the booklet that we are preparing. I can mention, and that's actually clearly from the Joint Up Governance project that we mentioned, that there is also funding opportunities at national and EU and international level that can help for piloting new ideas. And I would like to, in particular, to mention in the EU, the program on citizen equality, right and value, which is a new program for 2021 to 2027, that allows a lot of, that will provide a lot of funding for town twinning, networks of town, on citizenship participation. So there is possibility for city to actually have the possibility to develop a project or activities under this funding. There are also sometimes at national level some grants that can be provided for activities as well. We have some NSRI, for instance, that can eventually. So of course it may not apply necessarily everywhere, but it's really important indeed that cities actually map funding opportunities at different level and build on that. My second response is also that human rights is not necessarily linked to new budget. Human rights and the way the human rights city is developed, it's very much a mindset, a way to make sure that human rights is part of the culture. And that does not necessarily request further budget. That can start already by involving people more, cooperating more with different actors. So there is possibility within existing budget for that. Using champions and using a lot of people who have the energy and the wish and the interest to work on that. And the more this work is developed, the more there's possibility to get the buy-in at the city level to get more budget, or eventually through networks or through the national level to get maybe more funding. So that we should not wait until we have the perfect budget for that. There was also a very interesting question related to people's participation, and I think your initiative is really good for that. Huh? Yeah, I'll let you. Yeah.
If you allow me to do so, thank you very much for answering the budget question or the budgeting question. If you allow me to do so, I would ask Hans Zacharias again, maybe would you like to comment on what Geraldine pointed out when it came to the budgeting and the framework, when you see it on your local basis?
Yeah, well, I think I'm not that hopeful about budgets and that will support the more coordinating and inspiring function, because it's not that easy to get money from more sectoral budgets and to put them in a human rights office or. So I'm still very much inspired. There was in the audience of some people that are in Germany very experienced with that, and what the federal government in Germany did with the SDGs. And I think that's still the perfect example how to roll out an international framework and to tell from a national level, well, this should be translated on the local level. And you see in, well, I don't know exactly how many, but I think around 100 cities in Germany got funding for 2 years that they could hire an expert that set up an SDG program in the municipality. So to take the administration in this process and, well, to bring the expertise in and have the time to work on this. And this 200,000 euros you need for this kind of bringing in expertise to get it in combination with the overall expertise with the Betterment Foundation. That was an excellent example how you should do this, and to get from the national government that you say we're gonna support this. And well, our national government started a platform, but they even don't have themselves the 100,000 euros for running this platform. So the amount of money you need to give really impulses on, and the European funding in the Twins City program is is very small money for just exchanging some citizens from city to city. So it's really looking for a good solution on to get it financed. And well, there was a question also about twin cities.
Absolutely, absolutely. The question was, do you engage with your international twin cities on this topic, on the topic of human rights?
Well, that there is what there is that there are some cities that are know each other very well, so you could call them a network of twin cities. And of course, the colleagues from Nuremberg are already there for a long time, and in Barcelona, although they changing sometimes, but there is a long tradition of an office that is available. There in Bologna has a real human rights office, the city of Vienna, of course, but that are the key, that are a kind of extended twin city of people that really learn from each other, know about each other's approaches, and also, and then the similarities and differences are interesting. When we start to think beyond the framework and to go into a kind of peer-to-peer relation, also a kind of light reviewing each other and helping to come up and helping to push each other for a next step. That could be, of course, interesting to find couples, or to create more and more couples in a way that you also easily understand each other. Because when you start to come with a little team of 3 or 4 or 5 people to another city to motivate each other, actually, perhaps you should, it's easier to when you know each other's language, because most papers and documents are that you should read to get an impression what is really going on here and how to reflect on that from an outsider perspective. Then, and you also can have see similarities in cities that start like an NGO initiative, like in Cologne, but you also have it in Salzburg, and well, there's some examples for that. And you also have university initiatives, where the university is in the lead, and of course you have some mayors or civil servants that could be interesting to find mixes, because you have another struggle to convince others in the stakeholder network locally. Or you can say, for example, when the Cologne is that you started from in the municipality from the perspective it has to do with our international relations policies. It's inspired by we want to do the good thing when we have economic international relations. For example, that it matches very well with what the city of Ghent is doing. They also more in that corner of as a starting point. But perhaps when you say, well, that's what we can do very well, and we want to work on the combination of human rights with SDGs, then you find other interesting twin cities probably. But I think it's an interesting approach to have a look through what is the basic element we have in common, what we want to learn, and where can we find our sparring partners that could offer some interesting perspective on that.
Absolutely. Hans, thank you very much. That sounds very inspiring, also because we are very interested to know what our deputy mayor has to say to your inputs today, what kind of inspirations have been gathered. One last question I would like ask Geraldine, because she already hinted at the question, and it is linked to many things that have been said now. One participant was asking right at the beginning, I guess that human rights city as a label is a nice description to have for a city. How can citizens support the human rights cities in actually maintaining what it promises and to stay in touch with other human rights cities? The staying in touch has already been answered more or less, but have you got 2 or 3 other inputs that you could give, maybe Geraldine, from your point of view?
It's extremely important indeed, that aspect. A human rights city cannot do it without the people that are in the city. I would say more than the term citizen, it's actually people living there, with citizenship or not. It's extremely important. What we see from initiative of cities who have been human rights city for quite a few years now is that, of course, having human rights as an agenda is not necessarily something that is constant. There can be a moment where it's no longer so much on the agenda, and it's really the grassroots, the engagement of the population who ask to maintain the participation, to maintain this agenda that make an impact. So it's extremely important. So how to of course, social media has created a lot of facility into that. So they are really key actors. I would mention that there is, of course, the Guangzhou Forum of Human Rights City that is every year in the city of Guangzhou in Asia, that is accessible online every year. So there is already a possibility for a direct contact there. There is, of course, several networks. The UCLG network that is particularly linked. OSCHR is also very much linked to the Human Rights City initiative. So and different the different city themselves through social media. I think it's a possibility to continue and be in touch. And of course, FRA will continue to develop initiative to raise awareness on that through our forum. For instance, we had in October Fundamental Rights Forum, which was accessible online to everybody. That creates space also for continuing this discussion. And within city, it's very important to connect to grassroots organization for people to join, such as this initiative that you have to contribute and have the voice indeed heard within the municipality.
Geraldine and Hans, thank you so much for sharing your experience, for sharing your ideas, for giving inspiration, how we could promote and push forward this idea of a human rights city in Cologne, but also maybe for other participants who have been listening. So now it's time for a small wrap up by our Deputy Mayor, Andreas Wolter. Andreas, what kind of inspiration did you get now in the last minutes? Is there anything you would like to point out and shout out into the world of Cologne?
Yes, first of all, I'm very impressed about the activities in Utrecht, and I think Geraldine made a very good input for the framework we need for a human rights city. I think we are on the way to the human rights city. So you shared the word cloud, and we are very active in all fields who were mentioned there, as well as our citizens do. And this initiative is also a bottom-up initiative. So that's very, very important for good result. And that's very, we will see this very often in Cologne. And yeah, I think the structures who were mentioned in the framework in our administration, they exist. Perhaps we need to do some fine-tuning, but we could start our work. What's missing is a formal declaration. What's missing is you call it a dedicated elected representative. I think for this initiative, we will have a majority, but we have to talk, and that's also, that has to do with the Human Rights City initiative with all democratic parties in the council. And perhaps grants from the federal government or from the EU will also help to convince one or the other person in the city council. But at least I think, that's so. This Cologne is an open-minded city, and so I don't think that it is a big. We have big obstacles to get human rights cities.
Thank you very much, Andreas Wolter. It was actually very interesting. I'm very inspired now. I don't know how you feel as the participants that we unfortunately could not see and could not meet now directly, but Thank you so much for your inputs and your ideas, dear Hans Sackers, dear Geraldine Guy, and also thank you very much, Andreas Wolter. We wish to keep in touch with you. We wish to keep on the discussion and get more inspiration and see what fits for our city. Where can we improve things? Where do we have to push things forward? But of course, also to be connected and stay in touch and get in touch newly with other initiatives and other human rights cities or cities who want to be human rights cities, we think, and we believe that this is very important. So all we can do for now is tell you again, please keep in touch, spread the word, and also there have been quite a few links now that have been set in the chat. So you can check out again on our website the links for the recordings that will be published very soon. So I'm very sorry that I said something wrong at the beginning of this session, that the first recording will be published soon and is not published yet. The second one of this session will come very soon, and you will find further information and also useful links in the chat, but also on our website. Thank you so much to you all participants that you took your time in very difficult times. I mentioned in the beginning in German that it is about time that we get the idea what it is like to sit in one room again and to have time to discuss things, drink coffee or a beer, and really form a union to promote the idea of human rights cities. We hope we will be able to do that soon. Until then, we will meet you virtually and we will keep in touch with you. Thank you so much. Stay in touch, but stay healthy as well, and stay positive in your mind, and see you soon. Take care. Good night.